2nd of November, 3:38 p.m. Sholmes' suite. I still can't quite believe what just happened. I know. I inquired with the bailiff after the court session was adjourned, and it seems Mr. Vigil was taken to a hospital to recover. Right. 10 years ago now, Mr. Vigil attempted to commit suicide by jumping out of the window of the prison governor's office. But ever since then, he's completely blocked the memory of those events from his mind. Nobody knew his secret. Not his family, not even the man himself. But I forced it out into the open. Was it wrong of me to do that? Did I overstep the mark, I wonder? Runo... Oh, Iris. You were miles away. Anyway, I'll brew a fresh pot of soothing tea for you. Oh, thank you. You and Susie have had an exhausting day so far, haven't you? Oh. Thank you, Iris. How thoughtful of you. Do you happen to know where Mr. Sholmes is? When we came out of the courtroom back into the defendant's antechamber, he disappeared. Oh, nah, I don't know. He just suddenly sprang to his feet and left. All he said was, I must leave. I wonder if he's pursuing the mystery of Inspector Gregson's death. Well, you know what Early's always saying, don't you? There are mysteries in this world that should perhaps never be solved. For the construction of a solution comes only at the expense of the destruction of something else. What does that mean? He knows very well that when you open someone else's old wound, you often open your own too. But he just can't take his own advice and leave one alone. Solving mysteries is too important to him. That's true. So true. But that's what I love about Early, after all. I suppose that's the lot of a great detective in some ways. So then, let's have tea, and then I'll give you a hand. Oh, do you have time, Iris? Yeah, I'll finish this month's manuscript at last, with barely a day to spare before the deadline. Oh, I am so looking forward to it. A brand new story to read in the adventures of Sherlock Holmes. You know, I always heard Early's violin in the days before I have a deadline. You do? Poor Mr. Sholmes. I am sure that's very wise, Iris. How sensible of you. Now then, my dear fellows, let's make a plan of action before we continue our investigation. Right. So, how did it go in court this morning? Well, we still don't know the truth about what really happened, but one thing's increasingly clear. Lord Van Zeeks definitely didn't do it. Oh, goody. Yes, that's right. We managed to uncover several new facts as well. Oh, really? And there was another development too. Kazuma. Yes, it's quite clear now that Kazuma-sama is not himself. The way he's acting, it's almost as if he's possessed. I know. I mean, at the end of the proceedings earlier, he was like a bloodhound the way he was chasing down Mr. Vigil's forgotten past. He's not normally so mercilessly persistent. What's going on in his head, I wonder? I really need to sit down with Kazuma and try to understand what he's going through. If Gregson was really murdered the day before his body was discovered, then Lord Van Zeeks has to be innocent, you see. What? The day before? Well, that should be easy enough to work out, just by examining the corpse, surely.
Yes, you would expect so, but curiously, no time of death was included in the autopsy report.
That is curious. There are still unanswered questions about Lord Van Zieks, though, aren't there?
Oh, do you mean...
I mean, what was he doing there on Fresno Street that day in the first place?
Well, according to the man's testimony, he said he was investigating Inspector Gregson, didn't he?
And it turns out that little room was actually the inspector's secret office. Oh, that sounds like it has all the makings of a wonderfully devilish plot. But then why was that notice board in there covered in all those particular papers? Papers about cases with a link to the Reaper. I'm starting to get a bad feeling about all this. Oh dear, that sounds more like something horribly devilish.
We must start by looking into Inspector Gregson's movements of late.
I never imagined I might have to be investigating an inspector's movement.
Well, according to the entry in his diary, he was carrying out an incognito investigation of the Red-Headed League the day before his death.
Oh, you mean he was doing the same as early?
Well, Mr. Sholmes was trying to apply, whereas the inspector was supposed to be investigating. I do wish it had been the other way around.
Anyway, as it turns out, the inspector who went to investigate the Red-Headed League that day wasn't actually Gregson at all. It was Mr. Vigil, in possession of Gregson's identification. You know what that sounds like to me? Establishing an alibi.
Oh my! Yes, you're absolutely right, Iris.
But why would Gregson need an alibi?
It would appear that the inspector had something to do that he wished to keep secret.
Oh, I don't believe it. I always thought he was just an harmless lover of fish and chips.
But perhaps they were seasoned with something a little more potent than salt and vinegar. I think perhaps we should try to move away from food analogies.
Well, anyway, if Lord Van Zieks felt the need to investigate Gregson...
Yes, I agree. We must try to find out what he knows.
Vigil, you say? Isn't that the name of the lady who came to visit early yesterday?
That's right. To ask Mr. Sholmes if he would help her to find her missing husband. Only Mr. Sholmes completely passed the buck to us.
Actually, didn't you say that Mr. Vigil had been taken to the hospital?
Do you know which one?
Ah, it's St. Sinners. I'm starting to wonder if all the other hospitals in London have closed down. But that's amazing, Renault. You found the lady's husband already.
Well, I suppose I have. By accident. And 10 years ago, while Mr. Vigil was the chief warder at the prison, he was responsible for overseeing the professor's incarceration.
No. So when the convict escaped, he was held responsible and immediately dismissed. Oh, sometimes I really don't want to grow up.
There's more. For 10 years after that, while he was ostensibly working as a peddler, he also had another secret job. He was paid by Gregson to be his stand-in, to impersonate the inspector.
To impersonate Gregson? But why?
I have absolutely no idea.
Oh, Ginny was right. I'm starting to think old adults are up to no good now. Including you, Runo.
I haven't paid anyone to impersonate me. That means he has ties to the professor and to Inspector Gregson, though. So I do think we ought to pay a visit to Mr. Vigil, don't you?
Back to St. Sinners, then. Well, I think it's clear what we need to do, isn't it? Let us investigate, my dear fellows.
Oh, Iris, you're even more enthusiastic than usual today.
If anyone has anything to hide, my special Wilson shooting iron will soon set them straight.
That water pistol?
It's stuffed full of a piping hot extra special blend of mine.
Then I'm quite sure it will be very effective. I'd better be careful not to hide anything. Well, it feels a little strange that Mr. Sholmes is nowhere to be seen, but still. Let's go and see what we can find out.
Yes.
Alright then. Iris, about this. Oh no, what was I thinking? Why on earth did I show her that?
Poor old Grexy.
Iris, have a look at this.
That's not right. I thought you were supposed to say objection or the like when you present evidence.
No, that's only in court.
That's not fair. If you won't say it, then I won't look.
Objection.
Yay, that was great. Right, next.
Alright, I get the message. Someone's not in the mood for looking at things. Loud and clear, Iris. Interesting. Nowhere to be seen at all. Alright, let's go to prison, I guess.
Lord Van Zeeks is reading, look.
It doesn't seem like he wants visitors, does he? But he must have noticed that we're here, surely.
What do you Nupponese want?
That's no way to greet the lawyer who's trying his hardest to prove your innocence, is it?
Perhaps not. I apologize. So, what can I do for you, Mr. Naruhodo?
Lord Van Zeeks, speaking earnestly.
Oh, the fog will lift over London for the first time in months tomorrow.
This does feel very, very strange.
I must say, I was impressed.
Oh? Well, thank you.
Not by you, by your fellow Nupponese, your prosecutor friend.
Oh, I see. Yes.
It's sardonic, don't you think? For a man such as me, so loathing of the Nupponese, to be entirely at the mercy of the two of you. I suppose it's retribution for having played the part of the Reaper all these years.
Played the part? I think you know that this is worn by people in my country to show that they're defense lawyers, don't you?
And I think you know that I believed you to be merely playing at lawyercraft initially. But it would seem your armband may actually imply some dormant talent after all.
Lord Van Zeeks, do you mean...
Let's hope you wake up soon.
Yes, I was clearly daydreaming. I almost thought I got a compliment there.
What's that?
Is there something I was hoping to ask your opinion about, that's all.
It's a serious crime for the defense. Okay. It's information for prosecution by legal means.
I think we have more of a defense and client relationship now, don't we? Yep. Okay. What else can we do? What else can we use?
What's that?
Okay. You gotta know something about something, Van Zeeks. Come on. Work with me here. Alright. Forget the old evidence. Let's give him some of the new evidence. Like
this. What's that?
Okay. Never mind. What about this?
What's that?
And lastly, this.
What's that?
Okay. I guess that's it for showing stuff. Alright.
Kazuma, isn't it? Kazuma Soki. You say he's a friend of yours.
My best friend. He's the whole reason I got to come to Britain. It was all on his merit. I have nothing but respect for him.
Yes, I understand that only the best students are selected for such opportunities. And I had a fine demonstration of how sharp he is in the proceedings earlier today. He missed nothing. In fact, his flawless performance very much reminded me of his father.
Genshin Osogi, the professor?
It's true that the aristocracy at the time was the root of numerous grave societal problems. They were abusing their power, playing with the common man as pawns in politics, in economics, in war. In many ways, Asogi was carving out a canker from society that we British couldn't deal with ourselves.
Ah, I see.
But that's precisely why it makes no sense. Clint Van Zieks was a noble and upstanding man. He wasn't corrupt. Why did that damn Nupponese have to go and take my brother's life? In spite of having once saved mine.
He saved your life? How did that happen?
It was 10 years ago, on a foggy night. What was to be the professor's final strike had sent a wave of panic through the capital.
So Clint Van Zieks had already been killed at this point then?
Genshin and I were walking down some back streets at a late hour. Of course, at that point I had no idea of the true nature of the man at my side. All of a sudden...
Don't make a peep, you're coming with us.
We were surrounded. All of our assailants were armed with pistols, their faces obscured by scarves.
Oh.
Clint was not only from noble heritage, he was a brilliant prosecutor as well. The scum of London hated the sight of him, and they had no sympathy for his younger brother either. I had been targeted several times before already.
Yeah, Transix, alright. We got him.
I could hear them murmuring amongst themselves. I knew they were after me, but just when I thought my time had come.
If I let them kill you, Clint would never forgive me.
It was Asogi's voice, just a whisper in my ear. After that, I don't remember exactly what happened. The next thing I knew, there was silence all around. Genshin lay on the cobbled street. Blood was seeping from his left hand. He shielded me. Two days later, they arrested him, on suspicion of being London's most notorious mass murderer ever, the Professor.
How awful for you?
All at once, I lost the brother I revered and the foreign friend I held in such high regard.
I am so sorry, Lord Van Zieks. You once told me that you gladly allowed people to believe you were the Reaper, because it helped reduce the amount of serious crime that took place in London.
If keeping quiet and playing the part benefits the cause, a cause I myself am committed to pursuing, then why would I choose to say anything?
But the henchman of a criminal killed by the Reaper attacked you only the other day. And that was just the most recent of many attempts on your life, wasn't it? Someone is clearly profiting from your silence about all this. Someone is using you.
Believe me, ever since the Reaper first appeared, I have been doing my utmost to expose him. Or rather, expose the organization.
It's a whole organization.
It's inconceivable that all those accidents were orchestrated by one man. No, the Reaper always appears to have some very accurate information about the accused in each case, which can only mean that somebody at Scotland Yard is involved.
Someone at... You can't mean...
It's taken me many years, but I have finally identified the central figure in this Reaper organization. Tobias Gregson.
No. Gregson? The Reaper? So, the reason you were investigating Inspector Gregson is because you intended to expose him as the Reaper?
As I said, the Reaper of the Bailey is no single person. It's a highly secret organization with close ties to Scotland Yard. But there is no doubt that Gregson was a key member of that organization.
I don't believe it.
Are you saying that Gregson... that he was behind all those awful criminals meeting their...
Gregson didn't do the dirty work himself.
Oh.
He was a tactician. His job was to covertly investigate the marks and plot their assassinations. In order to do that without arousing suspicion, he regularly needed a firm alibi.
Which is where Mr. Vigil came in, posing as the inspector.
Vigil knows nothing of the Reaper, but the room he rents on Fresno Street was almost certainly the headquarters of the operation. Gregson would have met the assassins there for briefings.
So we don't actually know who carried out the killings then.
Actually, I do have a name.
You what? Well, if you can name the man, you have the true identity of the Reaper already then.
Oh, if I can name the woman.
Oh.
She's a young woman by the name of Assassin.
Wait. What? Shin? Miss Assassin. The true name of a terrifying killer I know only too well. She came to Japan posing as a visiting student and murdered Dr. John H. Wilson. Then, just when it seemed that diplomatic protection would help her escape Japan and conviction, the mysterious woman was herself murdered in a small summer beach hut. And that woman was actually the Reaper of the Bailey? Mr. Naruhodo, this perhaps isn't the place to discuss... No, of course not. We can't mention it here. The fact that she killed Dr. John H. Wilson. Because Iris doesn't know, and it's very likely that the man was her father. Asa Shin, I should let father know at once. Yes, I agree.
That's the end of my miserable tale. I never thought I'd recount it to anyone.
Well, thank you for confiding in me. The Professor, the Reaper, and Inspector Gregson. I wonder just how intimately related they all are. I still can't quite believe that Gregson was essentially the Reaper, giving assassination orders to Giselle Brett. Mr. Naruhodo, let's go and inform my father. I'm sure our government will want to hear about this new information.
Oh, that means I get to meet your daddy, Susie. Hooray!
Yeah, alright. Let's head back to the Great Waterloo Hotel then. Later, Van Zeeks. Nice talking to you. I thought it yesterday, and I think it again today. This place is so princely. It's a wild guess, but I have a feeling you'll think the same tomorrow, too. My tea has a finer fragrance than whatever they're serving in the tea room here, though. Wouldn't you say?
Look at what we have here. This is an unexpected pleasure.
Father! Oh, is this your daddy, Sizzy? How lovely.
What a charming young lady. And you are... Really? So, you are the author of the Adventures of Sherlock Holmes, are you?
That's me. Iris Wilson at your service, sir. Susie's been such a wonderful friend to me over the last year, you know.
Well, Mr. Wilson, I must say I read your work regularly with much interest.
Iris actually lives with Mr. Sholmes, you know, Father.
Is that so? Well, perhaps that goes some way to explaining that bright look in your eyes.
Hee hee.
You wouldn't be smiling so airily if you knew just how bright she is, believe me.
Now then, young Naruhodo, it was a pleasure seeing you in action earlier. As an invitee of the symposium, I was allowed to observe from the gallery, after I twisted some arms. And I must say, it was a truly exemplary performance.
Oh, well, thank you very much. Although I'm fairly sure you omitted by Cosma on the end there.
No, please don't misunderstand. It was you who impressed me.
Really?
You didn't miss a step against Sasuke, and we all know how capable he is. Really, to have matured to such a fine defense lawyer in less than a year is quite extraordinary.
It's very kind of you to say so, and really nice to hear.
What I saw in court today confirmed what I've been hoping for. The favor I mentioned yesterday, Naruhodo. I trust you haven't forgotten.
Oh, no, you did mention something, didn't you? But first, we have something to report, Father.
Of course. Shall we take tea while we discuss matters further?
I wonder where Judge Jikoku has got to. I haven't seen Judge Jikoku for a while, have you?
Guilty!
But that guilty is still ringing in my ears.
No, now you mention it, I haven't seen him since this morning either. I suppose since the symposium's opening was postponed, he'll have gone to explore at the great exhibition.
That reminds me of something you mentioned yesterday. About Judge Jikoku having once been in the dock himself.
Ah yes, it was all tied up with that accursed trial.
The closed trial of Kazuma's father.
Teacher was trying to mitigate conscience guilt, so he took to the stand to testify. But he got a little carried away and actually managed to break the witness stand.
Oh my!
He also said some contemptuous words about the British Empire, for which he was charged.
Oh dear, although it's worryingly easy to imagine him doing that.
Well, it was all alright in the end. He was acquitted, and we returned home to Japan together.
Thank goodness.
Ah yes, talking of Shichiru, I have a copy of the photograph we all took together here yesterday. Please.
Oh, what a lovely picture. It certainly seems to shout we've arrived in Britain.
None of us had any idea what was coming when we took that, did we?
No, that is so true. Father, do you know about the so-called Reaper of the Bailey?
I've heard the rumors. Some members of the judiciary explained it all to me yesterday. Of course, when I was a visiting student here in London, the Reaper was yet to emerge.
Right, he didn't appear until after that case when the visiting student had already returned home.
Lord Van Zieks was in the dock today. That was Barak, the younger brother of Clint Van Zieks, I believe.
That's right, and he's known throughout London as the Reaper, as you've heard. But the truth is, it wasn't him behind all of those mysterious deaths. It was somebody else.
I see. So what you're saying is there has been a professional killer at work here.
Exactly. Someone by the name of Assassin, in fact.
I beg your pardon. Did you say assassin? You mean that Giselle Brittle woman who was responsible for killing my great friend?
Oh no, a friend of yours was killed? Professor Makatoba, I think perhaps we shouldn't discuss this right now. Because the friend the professor is talking about is Dr. John H. Wilson. And that's not something we want Iris to find out about. Not like this, anyway. Ah, I've just remembered something. Biscuits. This hotel has the most delicious looking biscuits.
That was out of the blue.
She's doing this deliberately. I think I'll go and see if I can purchase some. I wonder, would you like to come too, Iris? Oh yeah. You just tried to leave me behind.
So, that young girl is called Iris Wilson, is she?
Yes, that's right.
And she is the author of all of those adventure stories starring the great detective Sholmes? But the name of the credited author isn't Iris, is it? It's Dr. John H. Wilson.
Yes, I know. That's the name of her father, you see.
Her father? Dr. John H. Wilson. I was deeply indebted to the man for all of the kindness he showed me during my time in London. That's why I was keen to reciprocate and invite him to the Imperial Yuma University 4 years ago.
But he was murdered last year by Giselle Brett. Why? Why would the hand of the Reaper stretch all the way to Japan? Iris knows nothing about that case, but it seems very likely that the victim, Dr. Wilson, was her father.
Well, I can't say that we ever spoke about his family, so I don't know if he had a daughter or not. But I think I can say with some certainty that he was never the great detective's partner.
So, it could have been another Dr. Wilson, you think?
Well, John and Wilson are both common names after all. Still, it's probably best not to mention this to the young lady until we can be sure.
That's what we thought, yes. We're back with cinnamon biscuits. Oh, they smell delicious, Iris. Oh, I think cinnamon will go very well with the tea they serve here, don't you, Susie? Yes, I'm sure you're right, Iris. So, you mentioned a favor that you'd like to ask me?
Well, this fateful trial that you are fighting, one way or another, it will be over before long. And when it is, I'd like you to accompany back to Japan.
You want me to do what? Father, what is the meaning of this?
Now, Susato, you should understand. You've seen how our courts work firsthand. Japan's judicial system is in its infancy, especially when it comes to defense.
Oh, you mean...
The Supreme Court of Judicature is in this desperate need of a good defense lawyer. As soon as possible. Really quite urgently, in fact.
But I've not even been in London a year yet.
I have read all of Sasato's reports. I am well aware of your extraordinary talents. And having seen you in action with my own eyes earlier today, there is no question. You, Naruhodo, are precisely the man our country needs.
So, you'd be leaving then, Reno?
But then, what am I supposed to do, Father? You came here to serve as Asogi's judicial assistant.
Oh yeah, she's supposed to be Cosmo's assistant.
Our government is still in the process of deciding how best to deal with his situation, though. You've always chosen your own path, Susato, and I trust your judgment in this matter also.
Father,
please, the pair of you, don't look so downcast. It's merely a suggestion, you understand. I hope if I'm honest, but I won't force you. All I ask is that you consider it and come to a decision by the time this trial concludes.
yes. Alright. You won't leave, will you, Reno? The thought hadn't even crossed my mind. Up until now, I've just been trying to do what I believe to be Cosmo's will. But it turns out that he's still alive, so where does that leave me?
Well, if you'll excuse me now, I need to telegram government ministers of the Japanese police with this information about assassin.
Of course, Father. Thank you.
Looking forward to next month's installment, Miss Wilson.
Oh, good. And please, do come to Baker Street sometime, won't you? We'd love to entertain you.
I would be delighted. The best of luck for tomorrow, Naruhodo. And give my suggestion your full consideration, won't you?
Yes, I will. Going back home? You know, Kazuma-sama has always meant a great deal to my father. I'm sure he'd love the chance to meet with him and talk to him about all of this. Yes, no doubt.
Assassin? Of course.
Oh, of course, it's so obvious. How could I have neglected to consider the possibility before now? Oh, Mr. Jones. Ellie, where have you been? Why, I joined you all for tea, of course. What an extraordinary question. I didn't notice you at all. No matter, no matter. Anyway, to more pressing concerns, Mr. Naruhodo. Yes? I must dispatch a telegram to your country at once. It is a matter of much urgency. To Japan, you mean? Tell me, to whom can I entrust the task? Quickly now, who? Well, my father has just now left to send a telegram to the Imperial Police Bureau of Japan himself.
I see. Well, he looked reliable enough for a bearded fellow.
I don't think what father sports could be considered a beard, Mr. Sholmes.
There's not a moment to lose. Kindly ask your trusty unshaven father to see this is sent.
I will, but what is it?
No questions at this time, if you please, Mrs. Otto. All we can do is pray that for once my deduction is awry.
Doesn't that imply that your deductions are normally correct, Mr. Sholmes?
Which isn't Now then! You may be surprised to learn that I am a very busy man. I certainly have no time to hide behind settees and eavesdrop on other people's conversations.
So that's what joining us for tea meant.
I leave the sending of this in your hands, then, my dear fellows.
Wait a minute, Mr. Sholmes.
He just sort of ran off, didn't he? At quite a pace.
I left the unpaid bill for his tea behind, too. I must catch up with father at the telegraph office at once.
And I'll run and call a cab straight away.
And there was me thinking everyone would be clamoring to pay Mr. Sholmes' bill. Well, time to go. Where to next? This is the ward where Mr. Vigil was brought, apparently. To be frank, I'm a little worried about seeing him again.
What was his voice again?
It was like, the lawyer. Hello again. Are you feeling better now, Mr. Vigil? Yes, thank you. Somewhat better.
I'm so sorry to have caused you to, I mean, it was because of me. If I hadn't exposed you a secret and forced you to remember things you'd obviously try to forget.
The prosecutor was here until a few moments ago, too. You just missed him.
Cosma beat us to it.
He said much the same as you. He was very apologetic. But the truth is, I brought all of this upon myself.
Please, don't think like that.
Keeping it from Evie, my wife, all these years, I've carried such a sense of guilt. But that's not the worst of it. Over time, I obviously came to deceive myself as well. You mean about your dismissal? Looking back now, I'm beginning to think that perhaps Inspector Gregson didn't stumble across me by accident at all. I mean, he compensated me so generously for acting as his stand-in. He was clearly concerned for my well-being and doing what he could do to help.
So perhaps Gregson knew exactly what had become of Mr. Vigil all along then.
I'm sure this is just desserts for 10 years of lies and deception. Deserts. But it wasn't me that helped the Professor escape 10 years ago. It wasn't me. I swear it. I swear it's true.
Oh, Mr. Vigil. I'm sure you'd rather not dredge out even more from your past at this time, but if possible, could you tell us exactly what really happened?
I want to. I need to get all this off my chest. I just want someone to tell me what I should have done. Right. So... Mr. Vigil, would you mind casting your eyes over this?
Oh, my head, it's throbbing.
Oh no! It's too soon, Mr. Naruhodo. It's too much for him. It's too much for me seeing him swoon like that. Maybe I should lay off the evidence for a while. Alright, fine. What about this? Okay. I'm gonna make him pass out. Alright, fine.
It was at midnight on 17th of June, 10 years ago. That was the time scheduled for the execution.
But the professor's execution never actually took place, did it?
Or rather, the execution itself must have been used to effect the plan of escape. I hardly dare to imagine what a chilling plan it was. Barclay was renowned for being the highest security prison in the country. Everything that went in or out of the place was searched multiple times. But there was one notable exception. Or rather, one notable loophole. Something that was never questioned.
I have a feeling I know what that loophole was now. The coffins into which the bodies of the executed convicts were placed, correct?
Yes. Once the coroner had confirmed the death of a condemned convict, the body was taken in its coffin for immediate burial in Lowgate Cemetery, just behind the prison. The chief warder first had to sign the necessary papers. And after that, no member of staff was permitted to touch the coffin containing the body again. When the execution took place, only the executioner and the coroner were permitted inside the chamber. I would wait in the adjacent room for word that the condemned convict was dead. On that occasion, once I had that confirmation, I went into the mortuary to find a lone coffin as usual. The procedure was that I would sign the paperwork having checked the coffin, then nail it shut. But for some reason that day, the coffin was already nailed shut.
No!
I didn't think anything of it at the time. I assumed that my deputy must have checked the coffin and nailed it shut before I arrived.
So you mean the coffin contained...
Yes, I can only imagine that if Sergei, having escaped his execution somehow, was still alive inside the coffin. The coffin was then taken out through the main gate and deposited in Lowgate Cemetery. Presumably there wouldn't have been enough air inside to breathe for long.
So in the early hours following the burial, somebody dug up the coffin again to set Genshin free.
But in the end, he was fatally shot in the graveyard anyway. What on earth really happened in Lowgate Cemetery that night, I wonder? I'm afraid I really don't know. All I can say with certainty are two things. Asogi couldn't possibly have escaped that way without help from somebody working in the prison. And that somebody was not me.
Obviously, you knew the man then. The professor, I mean. Genshin Asogi.
Yes, I remember him well, in fact.
Would you mind telling us what you know?
Well, having been condemned to death as he was, any contact I had with the man was short, obviously. After that trial, which was carried out behind closed doors, attended only by elite members of the judiciary, they called for his execution to be carried out at the earliest possible opportunity.
The outcome of the trial was set from the beginning, wasn't it? It was a time of delicate diplomacy when Britain and Japan were in the process of signing an important treaty. That meant that this potentially destabilizing case had to be dealt with swiftly and discreetly.
The man had less than a week in total. As I was the chief warder, I oversaw this. I oversaw his short stay in the cells until his final hour. I remember being struck deeply by his noble character and incredible resilience.
What do you mean exactly?
He was a killer of many men, but he was always quiet and polite. He was a gentleman and a man of intellect. In fact, I couldn't bring myself to believe what he'd done, so I asked him one day, "Those 5 members of the aristocracy whose lives were taken, were you really responsible?"
I am guilty of the unforgivable crime of ending another human's life, yes.
The following day, the closed trial took place, and the verdict was no surprise.
Guilty.
That night, when he was brought back to his cell, I saw something unusual.
Something unusual? What?
The last will and testament of Genshin Asogi. As I said, it was on the night following his trial after he'd been found guilty. I was doing the rounds of the cells, and when I looked into Asogi's, I noticed that he seemed to have a sheet of paper in his hand.
His last will and testament then, presumably.
As soon as he noticed me, he hurriedly shoved it behind his back.
But why did you find that so unusual? Isn't it normal for a man to pen a will when he knows his death is nigh?
Yes, that's true, but there were special conditions to Asogi's incarceration, you see.
What sort of conditions?
Well, even though he was held in a cell designed for condemned inmates, he was allowed to keep his personal effects with him, with one exception.
Really? He was allowed his things? That is unusual, certainly.
Of course, he'd been convicted of killing 5 members of the aristocracy. But at the same time, he was a guest in our country from the Empire of Japan. The powers that be were determined that his final days shouldn't be needlessly uncomfortable.
And what was the exception you mentioned? To the personal effects he was allowed?
That's the point. He wasn't permitted to have writing materials. Specifically, no pens or paper.
So he was prevented from leaving any written record of what had happened to him.
Yes, that was the long and the short of it. I've no idea where he obtained the paper. Any writing materials would have been confiscated from him upon his incarceration. As I said, he hid the paper behind his back, and then he pleaded with me. What did you just hide behind your back?
Please, turn a blind eye. This is my rifle.
But you know it's against the rules.
You're the only person who's seen. If you just agree to keep quiet.
Alright then, but what's on that paper?
A last will and testament. This will is the only weapon I have left now.
How can a will be a weapon?
So I decided to pretend I'd seen nothing, and I let him keep his will. But then later, it just seemed to vanish without trace.
What? What do you mean it vanished?
It would seem that isn't the end of the story of his mysterious will. I was the only person who saw Asogi's will, but
but somehow it disappeared.
It was after Sogi's execution.
Which was actually an elaborate jailbreak.
The warders gathered up Asogi's possessions that were in his cell. They were all to be sent back to his family home in Japan, you see. To poor Kazuma-sama.
And you're saying that it wasn't anywhere to be found amongst his personal effects? The will, I mean.
That's right, though I didn't search through them myself. But Governor Caton was livid. He was screaming, "It cannot have disappeared completely." That doesn't quite make sense though, does it?
In what way?
Well, we understood that only Mr. Vigil was aware of the will's existence.
In which case, how did the prison governor know to look for it? Oh yeah, you're right.
I really don't know how he knew, but it certainly seemed as though he knew of the will's existence from the outset. Only he didn't refer to it as a will. What he said was, "The Asogi Papers."
The Asogi Papers.
I really can't tell you anything of the subsequent events. Because, well, of what happened.
Your dismissal, and the way you blocked it all from your memory.
I'd forgotten all this until today. I don't suppose it's relevant to the case, though.
Well, anyway, thank you very much for sharing it with us, Mr. Vigil. We're very grateful. So,
Inspector Gregson was obviously engaged in a special operation of some sort. He was investigating something that even Scotland Yard couldn't know about.
details of the Reaper's marks, yes.
It was when he had to carry out those investigations that I would take his identification and impersonate him.
You'd pretend to be the inspector and carry out investigations on his behalf?
Oh no, never! A common street peddler couldn't possibly carry out a proper police investigation. All I would do is go to the specified location and make a little hoo-ha. Just something to leave an impression, so everyone there would think a detective called Gregson was here.
So, that's what you were doing on the day prior to the incident?
Yes, he asked me to make an appearance at the park on Lime Street for the Red-Headed League event. So as usual, I flashed the inspector's identification around and was very vocal about my presence.
But then you were taken prisoner by those red-headed fraudsters.
Yes.
So, you would always make a point of showing Gregson's identification and generally being loud?
That's what the inspector asked me to do, yes.
Well, that's one way of becoming a legendary detective, I suppose. Not a good one, though.
And as you know, I suffered this bruising around my neck at their hands. But the following day, they kept their word and released me.
Without returning the inspector's identification to you, however.
We had arranged to meet in the Frenzy Street room at 5 that day so I could report back to the inspector. But at the agreed time, that's when I heard the gunshot. I'm afraid there's really little more I can tell you. My wife Evie will be here shortly, so I do hope I don't appear rude, but...
No, not at all. Thank you again.
But what will become of you now? Well, impersonating a police officer is a criminal offense, of course. I imagine that once I'm fully recovered, I shall be arrested.
I'm sorry.
Don't be, please. This was all my own doing. I always knew that this day would come.
Well, I wish you well. Goodbye, Mr. Vigil.
Oh! Before you go, there's one thing.
Yes? What is it?
The Asogi papers. I'd be very grateful if you'd make no mention of the things I told you about them.
Presumably for some good reason?
It's my understanding that their very existence is a closely guarded secret. If it became known that I'd remembered, well, it could be rather troublesome, I think.
I understand. Some sort of will that Genshin Asogi penned just before his death, which the man himself claimed was his last weapon. I wonder, perhaps it had something to do with his plan to escape. If there's anyone who might know more about a document that Cosmo's father left behind, it would be Mr. Vigil's governor.
Then we know precisely where we must go. Back to Barclay Prison.
Alright then. These must be the patient's treatment notes. Let's see. Tendency to jump from windows. Remember to place cushion at base of wall outside. Aren't we a story up from the ground here?
Oh dear, poor Mr. Vigil.
I can't help thinking that there's a better solution to the problem than a cushion, though. Finding something you lost isn't always a happy experience, it turns out. Pursuing the truth can be a very dark business sometimes, can't it?
Yes, I'm afraid it can.
Alright. This note has caught my eye before, actually.
I suppose it's some sort of slogan for the ward.
A cheerful welcome message, perhaps? Let's see. Pay with good cheer, leave with good cheer. Well, look at that. You are spot on, Mr. Sato. It's full of cheer.
I wonder how many discharged patients pay their medical bills with good cheer, though.
Once I had to have a very painful injection when I fell ill with a cold. I felt awful already, so why did I have to suffer the sting of the injection as well as the bill? I yelled at the doctor.
Oh dear, what terrible treatment.
Tell me about it. I mean, what's the deal with the doctors and the bills? There are all sorts of medicines in this cabinet, look. I'm not sure if it's safe leaving them in reach of everyone like this.
Yes, you're right. I can imagine if you are peckish, you might try some of the pills.
Well, at least there seems to be a little lock to secure the cabinet doors.
I don't imagine that would stop you if you were hungry. I worry that you'll break the lock.
Hunger doesn't turn me into a criminal, you know, Mr. Sato. Ah, patient treatment notes. What do these say, I wonder? Endlessly obliging. I suppose that's referring to the patient in this bed.
I would think so. And until Mr. Vigil is a little more stable, it's probably just as well that he has a kindly person in the neighboring bed.
The endlessly part is a little worrying, though, isn't it? I mean, what if Mr. Vigil suddenly declared that he'd like to take a trip out of the window? Would this endlessly obliging patient simply open it for him and say, "Be my guest"?
Let's check with the doctor later.
Uh-huh. Oh, look, a pair of crutches. Before we came to Britain, I hadn't realized they were used here as well.
I imagine they were imported into Japan from Great Britain in the first place.
Oh, so no one in all of Japan broke a leg before their arrival? Anyway, the sight of these things doesn't bring back good memories for me.
Oh dear, did you injure yourself once and need to use some?
When I was little, I thought they looked fun, so I borrowed a pair to play with. But then I slipped and sprained my ankle.
I see.
They contain powerful magic, those wooden staves. The power to heal and the power to harm.
I think a certain cheeky little boy managed to cause the harm all by himself.
I'm not sure I like you referring to me like that. There are lots of bottles in that cabinet there, aren't there? Do you think it's safe to keep them there?
Hee, if you were a patient here, I feel sure you'd take some medicine by mistake when you were half asleep.
That is a worry, but at least the cabinet has a lock. even if it's only a flimsy-looking one. Oh, I have no doubt you'd manage to unlock that somehow while you were half asleep as well. There are limits even to what I can do when I'm half asleep, you know, Mrs. Sato. Alright, we're done here. Let's go to Barclay.